especially in a time like this, when there is so much polarization and division. Giving circles can offer, again, this space to find, to look people in the eyes, to find the humanity of one another, to find what makes us similar instead of being focusing on what separates us.
Welcome to the PM Podcast, brought to you by DonorSearch, the show that takes you inside the lives of thought leaders, innovators, and changemakers in fundraising, philanthropy, and civil society. I'm your host, Jay Frost. Sara Lomelin is a philanthropy disruptor and the founding CEO of Philanthropy Together, a global movement advancing collective giving. She's the creator of the Latino Giving Circle Network, the largest network of Latinx philanthropists in the US, and a TED speaker recognized on Forbes 50 over 50 impact list. Sara is passionate about shifting power in philanthropy and proving that everyone can be a philanthropist. I'd like to hear about your own origin story. I know you're originally from Mexico City, but take us back a little bit. Where are you really from?
Yes, that's a great question. And the where are you really from? That's a very, deep question, because at the end of the day, yes, I am Mexican. I was born in Mexico City. But then at this point, I have spent most of my life, like more than half of my life, in the US. So I feel 100% Mexican and 100% American. And at the end of the day, because my group of friends, my my chosen family in the US is incredibly international, I feel that, I'm from any part of the world. And it's funny because I have that kind of face, I was in Morocco in November and people were speaking to me in Arabic. If I'm in Spain, people think I'm from Spain. If I'm in Italy, I have been from every single country. People have thought I'm Brazilian, I'm, any Latin American country I have been, I can be part of them. And most of the Mediterranean and Middle East countries, I have that kind of face that I can be from anywhere. But I was born in Mexico City. My family is still there. I have 3 brothers. I'm the oldest and the only girl. My parents are still there. Catholic family. I went to an all-girls Catholic school led by French nuns. So the language that I learned in my childhood was French at school. I have a kindergarten level of English because, they were teaching French. English was kind of okay, we were saying my name is Patty, my name is Pip, we like to go to the movies and something like that. That was it. And then I really learned English after high school. I went away for a year, and in order to communicate with other people, you learn English. And then I started my career. I went to college, major in communications, and started my career in the corporate world. I used to work for a financial institution in Mexico, first doing internal communications, PR, and then I moved to manage the call center. And I'm going to date myself, but the call center before the internet. So this is when thousands of people, small business owners, are calling every single day to the bank to ask for their ballots, right? And every single thing, every single issue with your credit card, anything, it's by phone. So I learned very hands-on what customer service is and what it means to, literally create a bridge, a connection with someone that was upset, was impatient, may, think the worst of the company that I was working at, but just, how to connect with people at a human level.
I got married, we moved to the US for graduate school with the idea of just being, in the US for a couple of years and then going back to Mexico City. Well, my husband got a job in the Bay Area. So we moved from Boston to San Francisco. And 28 years later, I'm still here. So my children were born here in California. Most of the time I have been here in California. We lived for a few years in Texas, near Dallas. So we were there for 8 years. And it was in Dallas when I had kind of like my first connection with a Giving Circle. But before that, I need to backtrack a little bit. I was at some point an entrepreneur. So I had a small business. I was making baby sleeping bags for car seats and strollers.
So explain what that is. That's
Yeah, I know it sounds totally random, but it was a time in my life that I'm having children. One of my best friends is living in LA. She has, babies too and toddlers. And she came up with this idea that now is very popular because every single stroller comes now with like a little foot muff, with like a little, it looks like a sleeping bag.
Yeah.
Where you put the baby, especially for cold places like the East Coast, the Midwest. So the baby is very comfortable inside the sleeping bag, on the car seat or the stroller. So we started this at the beginning. It was 2000. It was the year 2000. And there was nothing in the market like that. And right now, to make the long story short, we had a blast. We learned a lot. I can write a book of what not to do when you have a small business. I mean, we were very naive in many ways, but the good thing is that, we break even. We were selling at some point at Amazon, and this was 2006, 2007. So anyway, we had a good run. And then after that, and kind of at the same time, coming from another country, I really wanted to understand the education system right here.
Especially with young children. I mean, your kids were, yes.
Completely. So I became the de facto volunteer at my children's school. We were living in Texas. My kids were going to a public elementary school. So I became the room mom, the grade level coordinator, the mom organizing the fall festival, the mom organizing the fundraising campaigns, everything. So during those years, Texas has a big expat Mexican population. A lot of people that live, in Monterrey or in Mexico City, that, moved to Texas especially when things started being pretty bad in Mexico in terms of, safety. A lot of people moved to many cities in Texas. So I had a big group of Latinas, especially Mexican friends there. And we used to get together every Mother's Day, just, to celebrate ourselves, I guess. And one year we said, what about charging a little bit more for, this luncheon that we put together? And whatever we raise, we can donate to an organization.
But where did that idea come from? Because everybody, I know what it's like when you're just trying to get your kids through school and make sure everybody cooperates. That's tough enough. How did you decide not only that you could cooperate, but did you ask everybody to pitch in and then support something that they couldn't yet see?
So this was outside of the school. So it was just with like my Mexican friends. And there was one of them that was volunteering in an organization in Dallas that was helping Latina moms and children. So basically women that were the same age as all of us with young kids, but that they didn't have the opportunities that we have. So we said, this place is amazing. They do a lot of like financial empowerment education for the moms while, they take care of the kids. So it was a beautiful organization. And it just makes sense. So that first year, I remember we raised around $2,000 to give to this organization called Avance. And then we continue doing this every year. So it was basically a Giving Circle. We started a Giving Circle without knowing that was called a Giving Circle. And that giving circle was raising, $500,000 a year at some point. Like it was crazy from a group of, 40 women. And most of the money was coming from the same group. So people were also, offering their gifts, right? So if there was an artist, she will donate, an art piece and someone else will buy it. If another woman was baking cakes, she will donate, 10 cakes and someone will buy that gift certificate. So there was a lot of very informal banter, I guess, and just interchange of goods and services and money. But we started doing this because I think the premise was, we are in this country. We're not, in a shopping trip anymore. Like we live in this country. Our kids are, educated in this country and we need to give back. And if we do not support our own communities, how can we ask other people to do it? So we always focus in supporting, in this case, organizations that were helping Latina women. And then in 2010, I came back to the Bay Area. We moved back to the Bay Area, and a good friend of mine was on the board of Latino Community Foundation in San Francisco. Actually, I have my mug of Latino Community Foundation.
Culture power, yes.
Yeah. So she said, you would love this organization, like you should check them out. And at that point, I had closed my business and I really wanted to find a job that was meaningful, something I didn't want to go back to do, to start a business or to go back to the corporate world. For me, it was really important to keep in this path of what can I do to help. And they were Latino Community Foundation was looking for a fundraiser. And it was the very first development position at Latino Community Foundation. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I have never in my life work for a nonprofit, or a foundation. I don't even know how this whole world, works. And funny enough, I met with the chair and the vice chair of the board. And after that lunch, I said, I don't care if they ask me, to clean the toilet and go and get the mail. And that's my job. I need to work with these women. I want to work with these women. So I don't know how I convinced them to get the job. I got the job. I was part-time. So we were 3.5 people. I was a half. My husband got me the Nonprofits for Dummies book. Remember those books, the yellow books? I read the book and then I realized, but hold on a second, this is not a nonprofit, it's a foundation, so it's another thing. So really I showed up saying, okay, I'm here to learn. And I have been learning ever since. So for almost, it's going to be at the end of this year, it's going to be 15 years that in philanthropy. And when I started at Latino Community Foundation, all the funding, first of all, the organization was tiny at that point. I think the budget was maybe $1.2 million or 1.1, that here in the Bay Area is a very small organization. Most of the funding was coming from foundations, a few corporate sponsorships for an annual gala. Not even the full board was giving. So we didn't have individual donors. It was just a handful of board members. The individual donors that we had were people coming to the annual event, and then no one was touching them in a year. And they will get invited again to the event. I'm like, no, we cannot do that. So for me, again, it was this idea of how can I go to different companies or call different foundations and ask them for money. They're going to ask, what about the Latino community? Who are your supporters? And I didn't have anything to show. So I thought about, okay, what about starting? My friend actually said, that thing that you started in Texas, it's called a Giving Circle. And there are many around the world. So I started, kind of researching a little bit. And I found APIP, Asian American Islanders, Pacific Islanders in philanthropy, at that point, they were on a roll to get 50 giving circles started as part of a Kellogg Foundation cohort. Amplifier, which is this network of Jewish giving circles based in New York, was just getting started. So I said, okay, we're going to start the giving circle. And we started the San Francisco Latina Giving Circle with a group of 16 women. Each of them was giving $1,000 a year. And all of them decided on the cause that they wanted to support, which was financial empowerment for women. And after the first 6 months, they gave their first $10,000 in grants. So one of the wives of one of the board members called me and she said, I really want to be part of this giving circle, but I live in Pleasanton. And Pleasanton is around an hour from San Francisco. With traffic, it's horrible. She said, can we start one here? And I said, sure. So she called her neighbors and we started the Pleasanton Latina Giving Circle. And then a year later, we started one in the East Bay and one in the Peninsula. The one in the Peninsula, I was living in the Peninsula. I took the school directory from my kids' school and literally, and please, audience, you shouldn't be doing this, but I did. I was looking at the school directory for looking to Latino surnames. And I was inviting all these women to breakfast at my house. And then, someone would say like, such and such is Latina. I'm like, she doesn't have a Latino surname. And she's like, no, but she's from Argentina. So I was calling all these women and I said, I have this idea. So I had 35 women coming to my house for a breakfast. And the very first thing that I said is like, should we speak in English? Should we speak in Spanish? First, everybody said Spanish, and it was a combination of Spanglish. And I told them about the giving circle. And literally that day, we had 22 women raising their hands and saying, yes, let's get this started. So
where was this hunger coming from? Because was it about, I really want to support an organization, or was it that these people had come together? What was it that stopped them from doing this before, and then it lit the fire for them then?
I think it was a combination of factors. I think a lot of people in this world want to help, and a lot of times they don't know how. They don't know what is the first step. That is one. Second one, the social aspect of a giving circle. I mean, it's beautiful, it's joyful, most of the times is around a table and there's food and there's laughter and there's, joy. And it's a little bit of understanding very clearly, because I don't want to sound naive, that the challenges that communities face all over the world are extremely overwhelming, and they're, they can paralyze us. But the act of giving should be joyful. It's a privilege to give. It's a privilege to be able to give not only your money, but your talents, your time, your voice to advocate, your testimony, right? Like your testimony and your ties. How do you open, different doors for the causes that you care about? So I think that was the other factor. And the third and very important one in this case, because I'm talking about, starting with Latino communities, a lot of these women said, yes, count me in. You are the very first person to ask me to give. And that is mind-blowing. Why? Because for a lot of fundraisers, right? A lot of like the big P philanthropy, Latinos, the Black community, the Asian Pacific Islander community, the Native American community, we are seen as recipients of philanthropy and not as philanthropists. And I feel that was the switch that sparked on people like, wait a second, my $1,000 may not have a huge impact by themselves, but if I get together with other women, we can give $25,000.
And I want to ask you about this from another lens, because what you just said is obviously true. And it's also true, and you've talked about this before, that there is very little funding that goes to all these communities you just identified from Big P Philanthropy. But sometimes people need to know how to do it, like you said a moment ago. And that means not only do they get together with others, as you just showed, but they need to have some kind of model so they understand what it is that we're talking about. So I want to go back a little bit. When you first got together with those other women, those other mothers in Texas, and then someone said, let's support this organization, then you collectively decided to do it and kept growing it. Did you already have in your mind, and did they in their minds, have a model for philanthropy? Because I know that there's a lot of informal giving in the Latino community, right? I mean, traditionally through churches, but many other ways. And so there was an example. Maybe it came from parents or from the experience of the church. What was it for you? What did you know of philanthropy before this whole process started?
Back in the day?
Yeah.
Totally. And, as I mentioned, I was raised Catholic. There was this, sense of service instilled in me from a very early age. Like we were volunteering and doing, going to different places to volunteer when I was in middle school. I was, 12, 13 years old. My parents have always, volunteer and be engaged in different causes. My dad to this day, he supports many young people, with their, college education, postgraduate education. There is this funny story. My dad lives most of the time in Acapulco, which is, by the Pacific coast. And he loves this place that there is like a live band to go on Thursdays, right? So he was there one time, and there was this young guy, 20-something years old, with a beautiful voice. And my dad came to him at the end and he said, you have a beautiful voice. Have you ever thought about becoming have you ever, listened to opera? Or do you like classical music? And this guy said, yes, I love it, but, I live in Acapulco, very humble beginnings. Well, this guy is now in New York. He's singing in so many places because, my dad gets something in his mind and he's like, if I can do something for one person, I'm going to do it. And so my mom is an educator. She has a preschool. She's turning 80 years old in a couple of weeks, and she still works every single day. So it's, this sense of there's so much that you can give, but also the joy and the fulfillment that you get it's incredible, right? I always said that giving is a very selfish act, because I really believe that you receive a lot more than what you give, in terms of, this sense of joy and fulfillment. And, those years at the Latino Community Foundation, because I told you about the few first giving circles that we started, one former board member, a man, said, what about the men? We're just starting, giving circles with women. What about the men? And I said, let's start one with men. So we started one with a group of 40 men, the San Francisco Latino Giving Circle. And a colleague and I were just, thinking, what are we going to do with a group of men? It was, for us, it was very, easy and natural, to deal with women. And we were talking about, let's talk about our values, to your point on how do you start that conversation, how you show people the way of how you start giving. We always started with a conversation about what are those values that have guided your life, who instilled those values in you, because it's literally whose shoulders you stand on, And how have those values guide your giving, right? So, with women, it was always like very, touchy feeling. We're like, oh, this is great. We said, what are we going to do with a group of 30 like professional men? Everybody was coming after work. So most of the people in finance and lawyers and blah, blah, blah. Oh my God, Jay, it was the most beautiful evening. Because the moment this group of men, very diverse in terms of ages and, socioeconomic status and immigration stories, just, family stories, started talking about their values and, their ancestors and their families. One of them started tearing up. And at some point, we had a room there were 25 men, like literally in tears. And we said, this is incredible. So we started opening more giving circles, Latinos in tech, San Diego, Los Angeles. We started 23 giving circles across California, about 500 people involved. And I was facilitating every single meeting of every single giving circle.
That sounds like not only a lot of work, but very emotional because of what you just said. If these people are coming together for the first time, empowered to do something together, they've probably been kind of sheltering their feelings at work and maybe even at home.
Totally.
But now they're in a room with these people, eating, talking, laughing, and maybe sharing stories. That's a very emotional experience for them, but also for you.
It was. And I was, you said it must have been exhausting. Yes. I was not eating dinner with my family 4 nights a week. And I was exhausted. But every single night when I would jump in my car to drive back home from any given circle or take the plane from LA or San Diego back, I felt so happy because it was like, oh my God, I want to do this again. Because the moment you see the spark in the eyes of someone that says, wow, I mean, we had so many people, so many members that after the first day that were part of the Giving Circle said, oh my God, I feel that I just came home. That found, home in this group that were strangers 2 hours before. In this group that was never going to get together if it wasn't for something like this. Because again, we had people in their 20s, just out of college, with people in their 60s, very seasoned professionals, people just starting their professions, people in the not-profit sector, in philanthropy, in finance, in law, in tech. And they were all, and people, and this is very important, especially in this moment in time, people from the two sides of the aisle, political affiliations, people that were thinking and very differently in those terms. But, or I should say not but, and they found what makes them similar. They found their common values instead of focusing on their differences and what, pull them apart. And they came together behind a common cause.
Had they had that opportunity before? I mean, now you're talking about a community within the community. If it's, let's say, a group of Mexican men, I'm sure they're from other places too, yeah. But originally many from Mexico, now they're talking about these things. The immigrant experience is different for every person. You alluded to that before. That's something that listeners may not be attuned to. There are very different points of view, politically, culturally, coming from one place and then immigrating to the United States. There's not a uniform view of anything. Yeah, no. Mm-hmm. So had they had much of an opportunity to discuss those things before?
Maybe not. I mean, Jay, there were some members in the Giving Circle, in the Latino Giving Circle Network, that even the fact of being able to be in a space that they could speak Spanish was new. Because they said, my everyday life is all in English, right? Like my work is all in English. My partner, doesn't speak Spanish. My kids don't speak Spanish. So the only opportunity for them to speak Spanish, maybe it was with their parents or grandparents or this. So that was, I feel that you really touch on a point that maybe they haven't. And at the same time, that we always, and this is something that I love about giving circles all over the world, it's always a safe space. People felt really at home and safe to be able to debate and be vulnerable and, communicate their point of view, and knowing that their point of view was going to be respected, like listened and respected. There were many, because, getting 25 people or 40 people in consensus to make a decision is not easy. And we did it. Why? Because there was a lot, again, and I'm going with the tagline of of the Latino Community Foundation, there was a lot of love. There was always like love in every single interaction. And I feel that translates in all the giving circles that I have, had the privilege to get connected with. Because, during those years, I mentioned that, I was in communication with APIP, with Amplifier, but each of us, and there was a group of women, we were all women for some reason, this movement is primarily led by women. So we were having these phone conversations like, oh, I'm encountering this issue. Have you had this challenge? Oh, yes, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But at some point in 2017, I got a call from Joelle Berman. She was leading Amplifier in New York. And she said, where are you? We're all here in Chicago for the Women's Philanthropy Institute Symposium. Like, Marsha Morgan from the Community Investment Network is here. Hallie Lee, from the Asian Women's Giving Circle. Diane Bailey from what is now Philanos, this network of women's giving circles. Where are you? And I said, friends, that I lead the giving circles, but I'm literally the development person here. Like I cannot go to a conference. And they said, this is so beautiful. Like, a group of people that are totally focused on the same thing. And we were just thinking that nothing like that exists for, the Giving Circle movement. So we just saw Victoria Vrana from the Gates Foundation and told her that we would love to do something like this with the Giving Circle people. And she gave us $25,000 to get some people together. Are you in? And I said, of course I'm in. So at the end of 2017, and I need to backtrack a little bit because in 2016 and released in 2017, the Collective Giving Research Group, led by, Jason Franklin, Jessica Berman, Julia Carboni, they came out with this research around giving circles. And at that point, they said, there are 1,600 giving circles in the US that, have involved 150,000 people. And in the last 2 decades, this movement of giving circles has given out $1.3 billion.
Right.
So the $1.3 billion in 20 years had everybody like, oh, wow. It's not that small.
And that was probably a conservative estimate.
Yes, of course. Because how, difficult it is to, do research, right?
Right.
So, there was this momentum. So when they approached Victoria said, yes, here $25,000, get some people together. At the end of 2017, we got about 40 people in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in the middle of winter, because you have to stretch $25,000 to get 40 people for a couple of days. And I met Isis Krause, our chief strategy officer there, because first of all, she has been the consultant that literally put all the architecture behind Amplifier. And she was brought to facilitate that, meeting with Giving Circle leaders. So after those 2 days, we were discussing, there were some networks that were very sophisticated, like in that case, the Impact 100, Wendy Stale was there. Philanos was very sophisticated. There were some networks that were not really a network, they were a group of 3 giving circles. So there was a very diverse group of people. And after the 2 days, we went back to Victoria and we said, we need something. As a movement, we need something, but we don't know yet what we need. We need more time and we need more resources. And we want to do this in true Giving Circle style. We want to embark in a full year of a co-design project. We're going to involve a lot more than the 40 people, and it's not feasible to have, 40 people leading this. So we were going to have a core group of 6. And then we are going to have working groups and involve more than 100 people in this. Funders, academics, researchers, Giving Circle leaders, Giving Circle members, like everybody. So Victoria said, okay, let's do this. She gave us $250,000 and it was a challenge grant. So we raised an extra $170,000, and I was part of that core group.
What was the argument you made to the other funders? I mean, it's one thing to have a challenge that's helpful. You'd already gathered these people together. You could point to the statistics from 2016. But what was the argument you made for giving circles at that point and the need to coordinate them and to raise money to do that?
Very good point. Because up to that point, the only big funder that had been behind collective giving and Giving Circles had been the Kellogg Foundation. The Kellogg Foundation has been funding this kind of work for decades under different names, right? I think it was Faces of Giving. Now, I was part also, Latino Community Foundation was part of the Catalyzing Community Giving, where I met Hallie and I met Marsha from Community Investment Network. APIP was part of that. So the Kellogg Foundation was the only funder there. But also at that point, there were also these conversations about Kellogg trying to, kind of move away for that work. Because let's face it, and this is very sad, and I have, I'm never going to get tired to make this argument. Big P philanthropy doesn't see the value of educating everyday donors. And Giving Circles, most of Giving Circles members are everyday donors. And a lot of the big foundations want to focus on an ultra high net wealth donor, on the giving pledgers, on the blah, blah, blah. And they do not see the value of everyday donors. So, the moment that the Gates Foundation said yes, it was like another big, check mark, like, ooh, there's another big funder, like finding value in this. So with that argument saying, we are not newbies in this, right? Like we have been Giving Circle networks that already exist and function. But what we want to do in this very decentralized movement, because the beauty of the movement is that it's totally decentralized, right? It's like distributed leadership. But we need something just to be able to have a little bit of economies of scale, right? Not as, the big funders were not funding individual Giving Circles or individual Giving Circle networks. We said, we want to, put together a plan. And we don't know if the plan is going to be a website, it's going to be a couple of PDFs, or it's going to be an organization. But we want to just research what is needed, what is the appetite from the field and different players in the field about this. So the Lodestart Foundation was the first one that came up with to give us some money for that challenge grant. And then we had an individual donor, and then Kellogg, and a few other donors. So we got to that challenge grant. And at that point, I was not at Latino Community Foundation anymore. I was working for Opportunity Fund. But I spoke with Jacqueline Garcelle, my boss at that time, and I said, Jacqueline, either you or Masha Cherniak, the VP of Programs, have to take this on. Because if we're not there, there is no Latino voice at the table. And I knew that nor Jacqueline nor Masha had the bandwidth to do it. And I said, you know what? Never mind. I'll do it as a volunteer. No one has to pay me, but Latinos have to be represented there. So it was so funny because we were having these, 2-hour calls every couple of weeks, like at 7 a.m. Because all of us had like full-time jobs, but we were doing this kind of in our volunteer time. And it was such an incredible process because, as I was telling you, we had working groups, we had surveys, we had hundreds of hours of Zoom calls before Zoom was popular. Like literally no one knew about Zoom and we were having Zoom calls. This was 2019. And we finished the process at the Gates Foundation with a room of 90 people and hundreds of Post-it notes all over the walls. And then ISIS put, beauty into that chaos. And we used to meet every few months around Hallie Lee's kitchen table. And just, to kind of give shape to all of this. So we went back to the Gates Foundation with a business plan for a 5-year initiative. And it didn't have a name. It was the Backbone Infrastructure Project. Like, what a horrible name, right? Like that's our grand name is that.
And this is 2019, you said.
This is 2019. So in the summer of 2019, we went back to Victoria and we said, okay, this is a plan. We want to create this initiative that is going to be very nimble, kind of like an innovation lab. And we are going to try different things to see if we can supercharge the American Giving Circle movement under 4 different, strategic areas. We're going to showcase, scale, strengthen, and sustain the movement. So showcase and scale is to bring new people into Giving Circles, right? We want to literally take the megaphone and just we want everybody to know what a Giving Circle is. We want to start new Giving Circles, with more diverse communities. We want more younger people, religious minorities, cross class, cross race. Like we really want to start more Giving Circles that are diverse, that really, bring younger people, religious minorities, cross class, cross race. Like we really want Giving Circles to reflect the beauty of, the diversity in the US. And then the other 2 strategic focus areas were strengthen and sustain. And that was to support the existing Giving Circle movement. So how do we create spaces and communities of practice, right, for the current practitioners in Giving Circles? So Victoria loved it. And they gave us a seed grant of $2 million to get started.
Oh, wow.
And at that point, the core team, split in 2. Some of us were raising more money. And then the other half were looking for a search firm to look for the person that was going to lead this initiative. And here comes the joke, because we used to draw, during our meetings around Hallie's kitchen table, this little Wonder Woman that was going to be the charismatic leader of this organization, right? Mm-hmm. And the joke was always, they always said oh, we hope you don't like your new job because you should really lead this. And I was like, no, I'm really liking my new job. And then at some point I realized, and I need to thank my children for this, because they were the ones who said, Mom, what you really like are giving circles. Like, that is your passion. And this is your baby. Like, you really need to put your name in the hat. Because what is going to happen if someone takes your baby and just, smooshes the baby? Like, no, you need to put your name in the hat. So I put my name in the hat. There were incredible people, candidates for the job. And I went through the whole, process. And long story short, I ended up leading what is now Philanthropy Together. And I have the best job in the world.
This all happened again, right at the dawn of the pandemic.
Yes. So, Jay, imagine this. So I decide to, I resigned to my job at Opportunity Fund on end of February. I accept the offer for Philanthropy Together at the same time. I was going to leave Opportunity Fund March 15 and have a couple of weeks off before starting Philanthropy Together. Well, March 13, the whole world collapsed. And my boss at Opportunity Fund asked me, she said, please do not leave until I have someone else to take this role. I was doing philanthropy, major gifts. And I said, of course not. I will help you. I will stay. So I had 2 jobs for 5 months. I was literally waking up at, 5:30 in the morning, working for 3.5 hours in Opportunity Fund, working on the weekends on Opportunity Fund, getting Philanthropy Together starting. It was ISIS in LA and I was in San Francisco, both of us connecting via Zoom and Slack all day long. And we started from the ground up, literally from, okay, we need email addresses. We need, to buy a couple of computers. This was a startup, and a startup that we got, up on April 1st of 2020. And looking back, I know at that point we were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? It was the perfect moment for us to get started. Because a lot of our audience didn't use technology that much before COVID. But with COVID, everyone learned how to use Zoom, how to use FaceTime, so it was perfect because our programming was always going to be virtual because we were a national organization. So suddenly, everybody was able to be part of that. And then the very first time that we put a program, we had a couple of guys joining from Germany, and a woman in Australia, and a woman in Chile, and a couple of people from France. And we said, how are these people finding us? Because at that point, we had literally 200 people following us on Facebook, and half of them were my cousins in Mexico. So I said, where are they finding us? But people were very hungry, especially, at the beginning of the pandemic, to do something. No one wanted to feel helpless. Everybody was, stuck at home feeling, what is mine to give? What can I do? And it was the perfect timing. So at that moment, we just, went back to our mission, and we scratched what it says, we're going to democratize and diversify philanthropy through the power of giving circles. In the US, we just put, instead of US, we said global. And we got started. And I'm the only thing that changed from the plan that we put together on paper to what we had to do because of the pandemic was that everything got accelerated. We had built, that first few months to really plan and, just get, things up slowly. And what happened was that we didn't have the privilege of time. We said, okay, no, we need to come up with programming right now. Like, I don't know if you remember, but that was the year when Giving Tuesday did Giving Tuesday Now in May, right?
Right.
So I was talking with the Giving Tuesday team, and we said, we'll build a toolkit for giving circles for Giving Tuesday Now. So literally, we were starting in April, and by March, by May, we already have, programming out. And the rest, I think you didn't want to start with Philanthropy Together, because I feel there's many, all the time I talk about Philanthropy Together, but these 5 years have been incredible, and that is why I said I have the best job in the world. Every day, I get to meet these change makers all over the world.
Sara, as you were talking about this, though, it struck me that you were in your home with your kids, probably going to virtual school.
Yes.
And assume your husband there, probably working out of the house, and you were working with 2 organizations, starting at 5:30 in the morning every day. How was that experience? I know that this is galvanizing the entire movement, and you achieved a lot in a short time, but what was the hardest part of setting this thing up for you?
Yes, it was. Now I'm thinking about it, and yes, it was hard, because, even from the very basic things that I had to call AT&T and get, like high speed internet, like, pronto, because suddenly, yes, we had 4 people, because I separated in 2017. So it was just my children and I at that point. Mm-hmm. But we had 4 people that were using the internet all day long, right? Mm-hmm. I think it was hard. What was hard? I'm a total extrovert, as you can attest. It was hard not being in an office anymore. But I feel that because it happened to everybody at the same time, I didn't feel it as something that I was just experiencing, right? As it was going to be the reality, right? Like my team is all over the US. I was never going to have an actual office. So I feel that is another, if COVID had any silver linings, I feel that feeling that everybody was going through the same thing helped me not feeling isolated.
Right.
One thing that has been hard is always, the funding. And I am extremely grateful for my funders, because we don't have that many funders, but the ones we have such an incredible relationship that is totally based in trust. Most of my grants are general ops, because people believe in us, right? People believe in the work that we have done. I cannot be more grateful to Isis Krauss, because she is brilliant. And from the very get-go, we have always delivered programs and everything with excellence and with a level of professionalism, but at the same time with authenticity, that I feel that has been our secret sauce. People feel extremely comfortable with us, because we are, you asked me at the beginning if there's anything that you don't want to talk about. And I told you, no, everything is, it's on the table. And we live like that. And when you are living authentically and you give yourself permission to be vulnerable, you're giving other people permission to be vulnerable and authentic too. And I think that has been extremely important. And especially, in a relationship with funders, it's important. Because, I don't want a funder that I'm kind of afraid of telling them, where I'm having challenges. And I think, because I have been a grant maker too, like when you don't want your grantees to not be truthful, right? You want to know what are they experiencing. So I am very, very grateful for that. I am extremely grateful for my team. I have an incredible an incredible, hardworking team. I'm grateful for all the people that have come along the way in very unexpected ways. Like, our beautiful branding was done pro bono by a good friend of mine in San Francisco. At the beginning of COVID, he was, literally losing projects. He has this incredibly successful design firm. And he said, I'll do your branding. I'll do your branding. And I said, I cannot afford you. And he said, I'll do it pro bono because I need a project that is going to excite my team during these very hard times. And I love our branding. And that was beautiful of him. And then I have another friend that reached out and said, hey, I just started this search firm because I want to get more emerging leaders and especially leaders of color in foundations and in nonprofits. And my gift during the pandemic is taking a client pro bono. And I saw that you have a couple of job listings on LinkedIn, and I would love to help you find your team. So Kate Bromwich found our team pro bono. And we had, for one of the positions, Jay, we had 350 resumes and applications. And for the other one, it was close to 300. So imagine going through, almost 600 resumes to find two people.
So there's a lot of hunger, not just to participate in the circles, but to support the movement of giving circles. And I wonder if that's one of the contrasts that you point to, because you've talked several times in this conversation about the difference between the big P philanthropy and the circles and their authenticity. I wonder why, in the end, big philanthropy hasn't yet, I don't think they have yet, adopted some of the cultural characteristics of the circles themselves. Is it possible for them to change because of what you're doing here?
I want to think that, yes. I want to think that we have, as hard as it has been, we have influenced big philanthropy. A lot of the work that I do is I live on a plane, basically. And thank God this happened, after my kids went to college. But I do go to a lot of philanthropy conferences and speak about, collective giving and especially, giving circles. And a lot of times people look at me and they said, my God, that is so innovative. And I'm like, no, people, it's not. It's not innovative. It's not rocket science. It's literally going back to basics. You said it when you said that, this type of informal philanthropy has been going on for generations, for centuries, all over the world. It's just a matter of going back to basics. I was listening to one of the previous episodes in your podcast, and, there was this conversation around how people are not going to temple or church or, the synagogue or a mosque that much. And people are not finding those spaces to connect, to find a sense of belonging, to be able to volunteer. And I feel that giving circles are the perfect solution for that, because it's a space where people can find a sense of belonging, can open a space for discourse with people with different perspectives and, learn again to debate in a civil way. They can give with trust and they can give their 5 T's, right? So I want to think that we have influenced big philanthropy. There's a lot to be done because, again, for me, collective giving and especially giving circles and everyday donors is not only about moving more money, but it's important for our society. We cannot afford to have generations of people that are apathetic and that they don't engage and they are not, involved in civic life and in service. And also, right now, what we're seeing in the world and the lack of funding and the, freezing funding all over, we need to ignite more everyday people into giving, because nonprofits need to diversify their pipeline of funding. And the only way you do it is by, growing your base.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. Maybe as we get close to the end of this particular conversation, and it's two things. First, with Philanthropy Together, where are things today? Because they were $1.3 billion for those 20 years before 2016, but it's grown a lot, in part because people see through Philanthropy Together what is possible, and they can build new circles and they can do these things. So where's the space? But also, in addition to that, what kind of impact do you think this will have on the political and cultural conversation we're going through right now? Because at the time that we're talking, there's a lot of consternation about the role of politics and how it may influence philanthropy and culture in general, especially trust. So, where has Philanthropy Together gone? Where's the circle movement gone? And do you think that there's a potential for it to influence some of this negative forces, the negative forces we see in politics and culture?
Totally. And, yes, and I'm happy that I'm so glad, Jay, that you came back to the growth of the movement, because I completely forgot to say it. And it's, the super exciting part, right? We commissioned this research that Michael Layton and Adriana Lozon Ceballo did a couple of years ago, and it was released last year. And we saw that just in the past 6 years, the Giving Circle movement in the US grew from 1,600 Giving Circles to more than 4,000 Giving Circles, from involving 150,000 people to involving 370,000 people, and from moving 1.3 billion in 20 years to move 3.1 billion in 6 years. And this research saw that the movement is poised to double every 5 years. So this is an extremely powerful people power philanthropy movement, right? And I do believe, especially in a time like this, when there is so much polarization and division, Giving Circles can offer, again, this space to find, to look people in the eyes, to find the humanity of one another, to find what makes us similar instead of being focusing on what separates us. And we see it all over the world. There are Giving Circles. I know I have been just talking about the Giving Circles in the US, but the movement is global. We're seeing many Giving Circles being started in China, in Singapore, in Australia, in Mexico, all over. So I really believe that, and again, going back to, I love this job. If I could do this job for the rest of my life, I will continue doing it, because I really believe in this movement, because everybody can be a part of it.
Well, that's it for this episode of the PM Podcast. If you would like to learn more about Philanthropy Together, visit philanthropytogether.org. Our thanks to our sponsor, DonorSearch, the world leader in AI and donor research for nonprofit fundraising. Our producer is Jack Frost, and our theme music is Moving Out, Moving In by Jay Taylor, and is provided courtesy of Epidemic Sound. If you like what you heard, make sure to subscribe wherever you like to listen. Check out our sister shows, Frontlines of Social Good and How to Raise, and come back next weekend for another conversation with a leader in the world of social good. Until then, this is Jay Frost. Thanks for joining me.